Okay, I'm not saying that I wanted him to die, but like if he did, the story would have worked out better. Hello everybody, my name is Tori, and today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up. So this month, I read 4 books, and I read a total of 1,183 pages. I had 2 5-star books, 1 3-star book, and 1 1-star book. As far as genres go, I read 1 fantasy, 2 nonfiction, and 1 romance. So, the first book I read this month, I kind of read it more in March, but I finished it in April, so I'm gonna count it. The first book I read was Dear John by Nicholas Sparks. This is the romance book I read. I ended up giving this 1 star. Oh boy. The first thing I wrote on my notes is just, ugh. This is about a guy named John, and so he was in the army for a while. He comes home on leave to North Carolina, and he meets this girl there, and immediately he just falls in love with her. Like, immediately. He's like,
I love you, where have you been my entire life? I must marry you immediately.
So obviously, it's really insta-love. The entire conflict is pretty much just built around the 2 main characters just being dumbasses. They're not talking to each other. The entire conflict is pretty much just hinged on miscommunication and just John not wanting to talk about how he feels. It's not that he doesn't want to talk about how he's feeling because he's a guy. It's just that he doesn't talk to her about what he wants at all. Editing Tori here. I explained this horribly. So I'm just gonna explain it here now. So basically, John set up this dinner reservation, and he didn't tell Savannah that he was setting up a dinner reservation. He was setting it up as a surprise for her. And then she came home, and she was like,
hey, so I'm gonna go out to a restaurant with my friends tonight. You can come along if you want.
And he was like,
Okay, cool.
he told her that he had nothing wrong with that. And keep in mind that at this point, Savannah does not know that he set up a restaurant reservation. So then, the entire night, he was pissed at her for not wanting to go to the restaurant when she didn't know about the plans for the restaurant in the first place. So there's that. And like, overall, these characters are just super flat and one-dimensional. So I am gonna go into spoilers right now. If you have any plans on reading this book, which I do not recommend it at all. It is so bad. But if you do have any plans on reading this, I would just jump to this timestamp, and yeah. Oh my god! So John and Savannah meet 1 year while John is on leave. Then he goes back to the army for a year. Then he comes back on leave, and that's when they go to Savannah's college, and that's when that whole thing happens. So then he leaves again for another year. Then they break up over the course of that year because she's like,
I'm in love with someone else.
So after like 3 years, John comes back to North Carolina. He goes to find Savannah where she lives, and she finds out that she's married. And so she was married to this guy named Tim. And so Tim was her best friend from John and Savannah were first dating. When John goes back to find Savannah, he finds out that Tim has skin cancer. And so they need to get these trials that, like, you know, Johns Hopkins and the Mayo Clinic, like stuff like that. They need to go to one of those hospitals. They don't have the money from their insurance company. So the night before John leaves, he's sitting in the hospital with Tim. Tim says, I want you to know that if anything happens to me, I want you to marry Savannah. I know that she's still in love with you. She's still in love with you. I know that you're still in love with her. Marry her! Savannah's own husband knows that she is not in love with him. And he knows that she's in love with this other guy. And he's telling this other guy to marry her. But in the end, John sells this coin collection that his dad had. This coin collection was his father's only passion in life. This coin collection was his grandfather's only passion. It was his father's only passion. It was what brought their family together. And he sold it! Like, his father told him not to sell it, and he sold it so that way he could pay for Tim's, like, trials. Okay, I'm not saying that I wanted him to die, but, like, if he did, the story would have worked out better. I'm just pissed. Like, I'm just angry. Anyway, so the next book I read was You'd Be Paranoid Too If Everyone Was Out to Get You by Austin Knight. So, for any of you that don't know, Austin Knight is the frontman of a band called Waterparks. They're one of my favorite bands. I love them. They're great. This is one of the nonfiction books I read. Sort of a memoir, autobiography kind of thing. I gave this 5 stars, although I think that might have been my inner fangirl talking. It's a great book, don't get me wrong, but now looking back, it's probably a little bit more of a 4-star read, but still, it's a great book. So even if you don't listen to Waterparks, I would still recommend this book, especially if you want to go into the music industry. He talks a lot about advice that you need, especially if you're in a band. Not necessarily if you're like a solo artist, but still I feel like a lot of this could still apply. For any of you that do listen to Waterparks and you like follow him on Twitter and stuff like that, his voice definitely comes through in this. Like this type of book is exactly what I would imagine him writing. It's a really fun read. I read this really quickly. I read this in like a couple days. It's 368 pages, so, but then again, like it's like a tall book, you know? It's a pretty long book. He has a very distinct style and tone of writing, and it worked perfectly with the stories that he was telling because it goes through kind of his entire life up until this point. He tells stories from when he was like younger, from like a kid, and then he tells stories from his first bands that he started and when he was a teenager growing up in Houston. And then he tells stories from like tours and stuff like that more recently and stuff. And so the book was able to jump back and forth between very lighthearted stories from like his teenage years and just him and his teenage friends just messing around and stuff like that, to more serious topics and more serious stories that take place more in his adult life. He was able to jump back and forth between them really, really well. And even in the more serious topics and in the more serious chapters, he was still able to put a little bit of humor into them, and it was so good. So yes, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this book. Also, it's such a pretty book. Like the cover is like this nice blue. Oh no, it looks yellow. It looks yellow in this lighting, but like it's orange. It's orange. And like the back is also the really nice blue. It's a great book. Definitely get it. So the third book I read was Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. Oh boy. Okay. So this was the fantasy book I read. I gave this 5 stars. It was so good. This is probably one of my favorites. It's my favorite of the month, definitely, but probably one of my favorites, like, of all time. This is so good. It's so good. So this has been on my shelf for a really long time. By really long time, I mean, like, 9 months. But that's a long time for me. Like, I usually buy a book, like, right after I read it. I bought this book last summer. This was in my book haul video, but it's so good. So for the like 1% of you watching this who have not heard of this series, Mare Barrow's world is divided by blood, those with red and those with silver. Mare and her family are lowly reds, destined to serve the silver elite, whose supernatural abilities make them nearly gods. Mare steals what she can to help her family survive, but a twist of fate leads her to the royal palace where, in front of the king and all of his nobles, she discovers an ability she didn't know she had. Except, her blood is red. To hide this impossibility, the king forces her into the role of a lost silver princess and betroths her to one of his own sons. As Mare is drawn further into the silver world, her actions put into motion a deadly and violent dance. Dance? Pitting prince against prince and Mare against her own heart. From debut author Victoria Aveyard comes a lush, vivid fantasy series where loyalty and desire can tear you apart, and the only certainty is betrayal. I just slapped my thigh so hard. Ow! The characters are so incredibly fleshed out. Everything that they do makes a lot of sense. Nothing really comes out of the blue in this book. I'm not gonna get into spoilers, but the plot twists are perfect. They are the best kind of plot twists because they're not predictable. I didn't see them coming, but once they happened, I was like, that makes so much sense. How did I not get that before? Those plot twists are the best, where like you don't see them coming, but they don't like completely come out of left field either, you know? So good. I really don't want to get into spoilers for this because I want you guys to get the full experience of reading it. And also, if I go into spoilers, I'm just gonna end up just yelling about the entire book because I love it so much. I'm not gonna get into spoilers. I really really don't want to get into spoilers for this. Okay, I'm gonna go into a little theory I have for the book here. So again, if you want to avoid spoilers, if you haven't read this yet, go to this timestamp. So I have an idea of like how she got her powers. My theory is that when her dad was out in war, he got a blood transfusion that he got like injected with silver blood in order to save his life. Something like that. Because they call her red and silver as if she's mixed. And then Shade has powers. He can teleport. And I think that Giza's gonna have powers. Because that night when Mare comes home from Will's little like cart thing, and her dad is outside. She's like, "You're walking again, oh my god." And he's like, "Don't tell your mother about this. I don't want her to think it's gonna be the same way as it was 20 years ago." And I think that he's saying that because she doesn't know that he got injected with silver blood. So I think that's also why Mare's abilities are so weird. That's been my theory for the entire, like, book. I thought that maybe it was because, this is gonna sound really dumb. I was thinking maybe red blood has a different, like, formula, if that makes any sense. Like, it's made up of different things than silver blood. So I was thinking maybe it's like the plasma in her red blood that lets her control lightning. Which, thinking back on that now, that's so dumb. There's magic. They're not gonna talk about plasma in your blood and that's why you can control lightning. But then again, like, Shade can't control lightning or even make lightning. Because that's a thing, she can make lightning. Shade has a different power, but one that they've never seen before either. Shade can teleport. So wild. But big recommendation. If you haven't read it, go read it. Do yourself a favor. I just got the second book and I'm so excited to read it, but you will see that in the second part of this video. Just you wait. And so the fourth and final book I read was The Assassinations of John and Robert Kennedy. In case you can't tell, this is the second nonfiction book I read. I gave this one 3 stars. So here's the thing. About 6 years ago, one of our neighbors cleaned out their bookshelf, and so they knew that I really liked reading. And so they gave me all of their books that they were getting rid of. And so I read a lot of them, but there are a bunch that are just still on my shelf that, like, I keep saying,
"Oh, I'll get around to reading it, I'll get around to reading it, I'll read it one day."
and I just never have. This was one of those books. So I've decided that I'm gonna start doing this thing while we're in this whole quarantine since I have a lot more time to read. So each book that I really want to read, in between each one, I'm gonna read one of these books. One of the books that I've had for so many years that I never got to. One of the books that I'm never gonna read unless I force myself to right now. So the title of this book is pretty self-explanatory. It's about the assassinations of JFK and his brother, Robert Kennedy. So this is pretty good if you like history. You can check out my Goodreads review about it. It's okay. It's a quick read. It's 151 pages. Look at those margins and look at the text size. It is a really quick read. It took me like a day. So if you like history, go ahead. If you don't, don't. So those are all the books that I read in April. But I'm going to do a little May haul for what I'm going to read in May, and I'm very excited. This is going to be very much like my book haul from the summer. Chaotic. Do not worry, I did not leave my house for these. I got them delivered from barnesandnoble.com. Saving grace. So the books that I'm going to read in the month of May, that at least I'm planning on reading right now, I'm probably going to have to pick up a couple more of the ones that I'm putting off, but the ones that I'm planning on reading right now, the first one is Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. 2 misfits, one extraordinary love story. Eleanor. Red hair, wrong clothes. Standing behind him until he turns his head. Lying beside him until he wakes up. Making everyone else seem drabber and flatter and never good enough. Eleanor. Park. He knows she'll love a song before he plays it for her. He laughs at her jokes before she can even get to the punchline. There's a place on his chest, just below his throat, that makes her want to keep promises. Park. Set over the course of 1 school year, this is the story of 2 star-crossed 16-year-olds, smart enough to know that first love almost never lasts, but brave and desperate enough to try. So I am very excited to read this book. I have been wanting to read this for a very long time. I'm just getting around to it now. Not gonna lie, not that crazy about the hardback. It's like a gray, greenish kind of color, but that's really pretty. That is a very pretty color. But I love Rainbow Rowell. I've only read Fangirl, but I'm definitely gonna get around to Carry On and Wayward Son. I know what people say about Wayward Son, but I'm gonna read it anyway. The second book I got is This Is Where It Ends by Marieke Nijkamp. I'm sorry, I 100% butchered that. I am so sorry. I'm not gonna read this one that dramatically, and I'm not gonna do as much editing because this is actually really sad. 10 a.m. The principal of Opportunity High School finishes her speech, welcoming the entire student body to a new semester and encouraging them to excel and achieve. 10:02 a.m. The students get up to leave the auditorium for their next class. 10:03 a.m. The auditorium doors won't open. 10:05 a.m., someone starts shooting. Told from 4 different perspectives over the span of 54 harrowing minutes, terror reigns as one student's calculated revenge turns into the ultimate game of survival. A ton of my friends have read this. They really recommended it. I'm kind of excited to read this. Obviously, it deals with some like really hard-hitting, really hard topics, but it does look really good. The cover looks really cool, and I know I kind of shouldn't say that, but like, look at that. That looks cool. A lot of people also told me that this is a crier, and I'm excited for that. I shouldn't be, but I'm excited for that because I really like books that make me cry. The third and final book I got, I know, only 3 books, that's not that many books, is of course Glass Sword, the sequel to Red Queen, and I'm so excited for this! I'm so excited for this! Also, I'm just gonna give you a little warning before I read the little blurb on the back. If you have not read Red Queen, this is going to spoil like the entire book. So skip to right here if you haven't read Red Queen yet and you don't want to like get spoiled for it. If there's one thing that Mare Barrow knows, it's that she's different. Mare Barrow's blood is red, the color of common folk. But her silver ability, the power to control lightning, has turned her into a weapon that the royal court tries to control. The crown calls her an impossibility, a fake. But as she makes her escape from Maven, the prince, the friend who betrayed her, Mare uncovers something startling. She is not the only one of her kind. Pursued by Maven, now a vindictive king, Mare sets out to find and recruit other red and silver fighters to join in the struggle against her oppressors. But Mare finds herself on a deadly path, at risk of becoming exactly the kind of monster she's trying to defeat. The electrifying next installment in the Red Queen series escalates the struggle between the growing rebel army and the blood-segregated world that they've always known, and pits Mare against the darkness that has grown in her soul. Look at that cover. It looks so good. A lot of the Red Queen books kind of look like that, but this one has silver blood on it. Also, I was looking at like all of them side by side. The lighting kind of makes it kind of hard to see. As the books go on, like the covers get a darker and darker shade of blue, and it looks so cool. It looks so good. So, those are all my books that I have for now. That was my April wrap-up and my May haul, and I'm so excited to read my new books for May. I really hope you guys like this video. I'm really excited to start posting more booktube videos. I think I might post a reading vlog, maybe. I'm definitely gonna do one of these 2 books. I'm not sure which though, so let me know which one you want me to do a reading vlog about. That is all for this video. I hope you all have an amazing day, and this is Tori, signing off. And he sold it! That was too angry. And like, he's like, yeah.